All right, so this is the first in, I told you yesterday that I was going to give you your review in parts. So we're going to post uh, two review videos today. There will be a third, but it won't be related to your review. It will be related to what I want you to do for discussion and that second half of the agenda. We're going to post two review videos today, and then two review videos tomorrow, and then two review videos on Friday. That's the goal. So that will constitute the review for last week's work. So, and I chose to I put a response in the forum. I think it was the day before yesterday at this point, that addressed the question of Socrates' response to Meletus and his accusation of atheism. And so what I want to do is what I put in the document I posted was a little involved, so I wanted to do this first video and then finish out my response with the second video for today. So now, in the passage in question, and that passage was, hold on one second, begins right here. It was on page, and I will give you the page in 1 second. It started on page 31 and went into page 32. So there, Socrates said, "Examine with me, gentlemen, how he appears to contradict himself." And he, of course, being Meletus. "And you, Meletus, answer us." So when Socrates says, "Examine with me, gentlemen," of course, in this sense, the gentleman refers to the jury, those 501 jurors. And he's saying that Meletus is contradicting himself. So before we go on, it's really important that you understand what a contradiction is. And you might already understand this, but part of what you need to understand is part of what doing philosophy is to make sure that you have clarity about the terms, the concepts that you use. Because if we talk about, if we talk about things and we're not quite clear about what they are, then we could, if there's two people, we could be talking past each other. If we're even for ourselves, if we're just trying to go through a problem ourselves, if the terms we're using are not quite sure, or not quite clear, then the arguments we make are not going to be very good. So we want to talk then about contradiction first to get at this passage. So now in the document that I posted, I actually said to talk about contradiction, I wanted to look at the words of Aristotle, and I told you that you should kind of brace yourself because it's a bit difficult to understand what he says. But I'll give you his words, and then I'll explain what he's trying to convey in plain English. So in book 4 of his Metaphysics, which you don't need to read for this course, just I'm just happen to be quoting from it, Aristotle says, "For a principle which everyone must have who knows anything about being is not a hypothesis, and that which everyone must know who knows anything, he must already have when he comes to a special study. Evidently, then, such a principle is the most certain of all. Which principle this is, we proceed to say. It is that the same attribute cannot at the same time belong and not belong to the same subject in the same respect. This, then, is the most certain of all principles." Okay, so the first thing we need to make certain, or to make clear here, is that we should take note, is that Aristotle in this passage is looking for the most certain principle. And he says such a principle cannot be a hypothesis. And the dictionary definition of a hypothesis is a supposition or a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. And the way we get that is, you have really this word thesis, right? Which can be an explanation of something, and then this Greek prefix hypo or epo, right? And that means below or under. And the idea here is that you have an undeveloped explanation. But excuse me, Aristotle in this passage is saying, no. It can't be a hypothesis. So we need a principle which everyone must have who knows anything about being. And by being, he's just talking about the things that exist. And that which everyone must know who knows anything. In other words, he wants a principle that's so fundamental, but also so known, that in order to engage in any other kind of reasoning, you need this principle. So that's why he says, and that which everyone must know who knows anything, he must already have. He must already have. When he comes to a special study, like ethics or sociology or anything. So by a special study, you can understand that to mean subject. Evidently then, such a principle is the most certain of all. Which principle this is, we proceed to say. It is the same attribute. So this is the principle. Let me put this in red here. It is that the same attribute cannot at the same time belong and not belong to the same subject in the same respect. So even then, with that in mind, you might be like, but what does that mean? That's still a little funny. You really have to kind of think about that. And so let's use a very concrete example. Okay? So if I'm using a really concrete example, and I'm going to draw something, but it's going to end up looking like an apple, but it's going to look like a tomato. So you can just pretend that it's you can pretend it's an apple for me. So I guess I want brown. So here I got this table. Okay. And so let's say that on this table we have a red delicious apple. And I told you it would look like a tomato, but work with me. All right, so here's the red delicious apple. I guess it has a stem there. I'm going to put a little stem in there. If I made the stem green, it would definitely look like a tomato. Okay, so now this apple sits on the table, and let's assume that the apple is 2.5, let's say, I'm sorry, 2.25 inches high. Okay? And it's 2 inches in diameter. And it's got, it's mostly red, but it's got some small white spots and patches scattered in a few parts. So, now with that in mind, consider the following sentence about the apple. There is a red delicious apple on the table that is mostly red, two and a quarter inches high, and 2 inches in diameter. Now notice, the apple either is 2 inches, 2¼ inches high, or it's not. It's either 2 inches in diameter, or it's not. It can't be both. And if we were to say there is and is not a red delicious apple on the table that is mostly red, 2¼ inches high and 2 inches in diameter, then we have a contradiction. Right? So, and that's what Aristotle means when he says the most certain principle is that the same attribute cannot at the same time belong and not belong to the same subject in the same sense. All right, so there we have, just chew on that for a little bit, no pun intended, because we used the example of an apple. And